morning. I am so excited to be here today. 4 years ago, I stood on this same TEDx stage, but then as an MC for the first ever TEDxAideyanSt that we had. And today I'm standing here as a speaker. So I feel like it's so good to be back home, and thank you very much. Today I want to start off by asking us a question that I would like us to really ponder on as we go through the rest of this conversation for the next 15 minutes or thereabout. And the question I have for us this morning is, do you think that as a nation we can rebuild? Or do you think that we are a case of gone beyond repair? The theme for this conference is rebuild, rebuilding the nation, rebuilding Nigeria, rebuilding Edo State. And this particular question is so important as we proceed. Africa, an amazing continent. Nigeria, filled with abundant natural resources. A vibrant youth population. But why does it seem that the more resilient we get, it seems like things become tougher? It's like the more we push, it seems like we're being pushed back, right? So could it be that we really are doomed to despair and nothing can be done about it? Well, we'll find out as we go. In the next 15 minutes, I'll be sharing with us 5 things that I have found to be critical for us to become architects of the new Nigeria, or architects of change in that sector that you've been called to. So from health, to education, to agriculture, to clean energy. What are the things that you can do to gradually begin to drive change and make a positive impact? All right. One of the things that I find very striking is the fact that it's not like we don't know the problems, right? We know what the problems are. We know that our education system needs to be fixed. We know that healthcare really needs to be looked into. In fact, statistics say that 9 out of 10 children in sub-Saharan Africa cannot read by the age of 10. So we know this problem. That means we're conscious of the problems that happen around us. We're socially conscious. But what really can birth social change is not just knowing the problem, but being responsible towards that problem. And how we can become responsible is what I would like to share with us this morning. And the first of it would be visionary thinking. Now, when we look at these slides, when you see these images on the screen, what comes to mind? Just think about it. What comes to mind? We see visionaries. We see a dream. We see people who had strong conviction about a cause, and they gave themselves to it. You see Mandela. You see Fela. And then you see Okonjo-Iweala. So it's diverse. It's really not limited to, oh, I'm an artist, or oh, I'm a tech person, so this doesn't affect me. Or oh, maybe it's just for people in politics. With music, Fela did wonders for our nation. And so when we talk about visionary thinking, how does that apply to you? We're talking about having a clear picture of the preferred future that you would like to see. A clear picture of the preferred future for the sector that you've been called to, or for the sectors that really burn heavily on your heart. So you've been called to education, you've been called to health, you've been called to the family unit. What is the clear picture of the preferred future for you? And that is a question I would like you to think about and ask. For these people that I really want to help and elevate the standard of their living, what would be the ideal world if they were to live in it? And just like the pictures that we had before, how can you then put your conviction behind that and say, I am going to give my all to see that it happens? Now, I come from a long lineage of police officers. My father he's a retired police officer. My grandfather, in his time, was notorious, God rest his soul. He was notorious for, chasing down armed robbers right here in the city of Benin. Well, my great-grandfather happened to break that chain, He was like a native doctor. So you don't even, well, so that happened, right? And why am I sharing this story with us? Because in the year 2020, in the month of October, something significant, something like we've never seen before, happened in our very beloved country. Can we recall what that might be? The EndSARS, right? And we had lots of youths from something that was just, a hashtag on Twitter, right? EndSARS. And we saw massive protests break out in major cities of Nigeria, where we had the youth saying, we've had enough, right? We can no longer do this anymore. We need reforms. We need that particular segment of the police force to be really taken out, which is the Special Anti-Robbery Squad. And while that is really, significant, and we can probably tie that to the first point, right? Which is visionary. We won't do this. We need something to happen. Something that I would like us to really look into as we talk on this second point is the fact that beyond visionary thinking, it's important that we're able to introspect as a society. And when I say introspection, what do I mean? I mean that it's very important that we're able to move our focus from what the problem is to why the problem is. Right? So many a times we're focusing on what the problem is, but really, those will only end up giving us solutions that are short fixes. They would really not get us to the destination that we want to get to as a country, or as a continent, if I would say. And I would still use EndSARS as a case in point. So we clamored, right? Get these people off the streets. But do you know that these same people who we clamored to be taken off the streets, I was here. This is a barrack in Obalende, in Lagos. I was here just last 2 years. Or maybe late last year. And I was shocked to see the state at which these people live in. Now, I'm not saying this to abdicate them of, the things that they had done over time. But I'm saying that we cannot just focus on what the problem is without focusing on why the problem exists, because till we focus on why that problem exists and solve those problems, we'll still be back where we are. So you took them off the streets, right? They are no longer SARS, but they probably will become, they'll be recruited into another division. And what happens when they get there? And these fundamentals are still untreated. We'll be back to where we started. And this applies really to any sector that you probably are called to. You're in education. It's not just about giving free book packs. It's not just about, giving lunches in school. Really, when we see statistics like we have 10 children, 9 out of 10 children who cannot read, the question is, that's where the problem is. That's what we need to solve. Giving them free books will not solve that problem. You need to really begin to think about what kind of measures can we use to treat that problem at the core. Right? So the second thing that we need to really do to become architects of a new Nigeria, of a new Africa, would be to introspect every time we are faced with a problem for the sectors that we've been called to. The third thing that I would like to speak of would be the bottom-to-top approach, which is simply right where you are, at the grassroots. What are you doing? As a people, it's very critical that we move from this mindset of just, it's not my problem, it's their problem, right? As long as my family and myself are fine, everybody is okay. But is that really the case? The truth of the matter is, when we do not pay attention to social problems, what that does is that it widens the inequality gaps. And when those inequality gaps, talking about poverty, is widespread, what happens? We see that poverty can be weaponized. And you can think about that in buying your vote. You can think about that in paying a young man as little as 2,000 naira to kill someone. That is poverty being weaponized. And why? Because we feel, if I'm okay, well, it really doesn't concern me. But it does concern you. And when we do not pay attention to these things, what happens is that these social vices, they thrive. So the bottom-to-top approach is, you need to stop abdicating responsibility to the government. This conversation of social responsibility is not really about the government. It's really not about NGOs. It's really not about a select few. No, it's not no special people. It's you and I that can make that change and can make that difference. So right where you are, what can you begin to do differently? I would like that, to be a thought that really borders on your mind even as we move forward. And then I'm going to be moving on to an example of what a bottom-to-top approach is. This is a brand called TEDxAideyanSt, and what they do is create access to digital and financial inclusion for rural women, farmers especially, and people who are in the informal sector. On a normal day, we would think, well, the government should help them create that inclusion, right? Right? The government should. I'm not an NGO. Why should I? But these people have come together and they reached out, which would lead me on to my next point. They reached out to other people to say, what can we do differently? And some of the pictures that you can see, you see this woman, to the left, handing her a phone, because really, in some parts of Nigeria, it might shock you that some people have never used WhatsApp. Oh yes, yeah. They don't even have a smartphone to talk of using WhatsApp. And these are the realities. But sometimes it's like we're in a space of our own, everything is all right, so we think everything is all right. Everything is not all right. Until we become socially responsible, like I said, these social ills will prevail. And so they came together, they have a number of initiatives, digital access, digital literacy, even teaching us, this is how you use WhatsApp. Really interesting, I find it. And this is an example of how we can also take responsibility right where we are. With one person, 2 people, 3 people, and begin to build from the bottom up. If the top to the bottom seems to be a type of way, right, then we also have a responsibility. It brings me to my 4th point. I said we have 5 things that we can do, right? The 4th will be to place a demand on our genius. The speaker before me, Osaru, had said a lot of salient points. When she talked about the bronze genius that we have, for example, in Benin City, she talked about the architectural genius with the moats that we have around the city. This is what I have found, friends. It's that it's wired within our DNA to be able to be innovative and creative. It is not something that is reserved for a select race, a select color, a select, people. We have what it is. And what we need to do is press into that is within us to actually create solutions that make a difference. And finally, this seems to be coming out a lot. So when the speaker earlier said it, I smiled. We need to rekindle our African spirit and ask ourselves a very simple question. Who are we at our core? When I think about who we are, and from the stories that my father would tell me, I think we are very communal people. I'm sure you've heard this adage, which says it takes a village to raise a child. Right? So if probably somebody beats you outside, your mom will say, they are looking after me for you, that type of thing. So they are looking after you for me, rather. And I truly believe that it would also take a village to really change the problems that we face in Africa. We can no longer be individualistic as a people. We really need to begin to look within into that communal value that we have and begin to be our brother's keeper. And your brother doesn't have to be your neighbor, your sister, your biological, your brother's keeper for that sector that you've been sent to. We are communal. We're people who care about the next person. We also are people of integrity. And so I would like us to ponder on this as I bring my conversation to a close this morning. We talked about the fact that social consciousness, which is that we're aware of the problems that exist around us, is very key to betting change in our society, right? And we must marry that with social responsibility if we truly must bet social change. So my question is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how conscious are you about that sector that you've been sent to? Do you really know the harsh realities that exist right there? Or you're probably just still living in your head and you think, well, it really doesn't make a difference. And then, if you already are conscious, the next question is, how responsible are you? How responsible are you? What are you doing right where you are? Because that's the only way that we can bet change. I love this quote so much by Nelson Mandela. He said, sometimes it falls upon a generation to be great. He says, you can be that great generation. And I really believe that we can be that great generation. And how we can be that great generation is really when we can become visionary in our thinking. It's really when we can place a demand on our genius. It's really when we can begin to look beyond ourselves and not say it's their problem, but our problem, and really begin to apply ourselves because we already have what it takes to make these changes. Friends, there's no better time to be African than now. Why? Because when we live in a situation or in a continent or a time such as now where we have lots of problems that exist, It means that it's an opportunity to create solutions from tech to health to education to agriculture. And I believe that everyone seated here and those watching are people who hold what it takes to create that solutions. Thank you so much. Let's rebuild Africa.